it occurred to me how rude it is to eat food in front of a camera. Like in elementary school, they teach you if you're gonna eat something, make sure you have enough to share. And even though I'm by myself, looking at the pinpoint of a camera lens, just the thought that this is going to be watched by 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000, a million people, just, I don't know, made me cringe. Like I was being reprimanded by my kindergarten teacher, Miss Solis. Bring enough to share. So I apologize for eating that bolillo of bread. Promise not to do that again. In the meantime, this is chapter 21, the end of part 2. And if I close my eyes and reimagine what it was I was intending with this part, it's to firmly establish who Mikhail is, the protagonist, the narrator, the charming yet boyish 22-year-old. So, yeah, we just had a giant monologue. And how does the author finish part 2? It says here, chapter 21. The boys and I weren't talking. We might have been traveling at the speed of sound, but the tension between us stuck around. Seemed more and more like alcohol was the only way we could connect, though it felt at times like a moat, and I was drowning. The other two loonies acted perfectly fine. They sat down to breakfast without waking me, eating together without me. And by the time I walked down to meet them, they gave me a cold salutation and sauntered upstairs. So what? I hadn't done anything to them. Maybe nothing's the matter. I didn't care at that point. I needed something in my stomach. Something to tell me a new day had given rise to new possibilities. For moving on. At a table alone, breakfast being stowed away, chill music, lounge staff, and a handful of stragglers set the scene. The handful were begging for a room, but things at Il Cielo were overbooked. Don't worry, I almost told the group. Wherever you're from, I'm leaving today. You can take my bed. And they would make it work. Anyhow, alone, I looked down at my bowl of cereal, and that thing looked nasty. The vanilla puffs had disintegrated between layers of saturated milk fat. Specks of carbon from a dirty dishwasher had caked onto my bowl's concave body. Maybe I had picked the worst bowl on purpose. Something nice and dirty. Well, folks, here it is, your hero. Elbows crossed over a soggy hostel breakfast. At least the hostel tea was strong. At least the hostel thermos had more hot water. Excuse me, I heard a voice somewhere say. It had come from a short and thin man with a 4-day beard and messy curls as black as his unknown pleasure shirt. Looked like someone had combed his sideburns with gray dye, though everything else about him was dark. I already knew what he wanted, because I had taken the thing and been serving myself with it. Excuse me, he repeated. May I borrow the thermos? The way he had dropped the H and had tucked back the S convinced me of where he was from. Not to mention what was under his arm. Argentino? Obvio, papá, ¿vos también? Under his arm was a half-full, half-curled bag of yerba mate. The drink of the gods, as the Argentines of the interior claim. It really is. Packed with vitamins and minerals, enough caffeine to power you from breakfast to lunch or pull an all-nighter. Mateína lo llaman. And that's the ritual. Something special about a well-packed mate that excites the senses. I was never a fan growing up. My mother drank it daily, an old habit since her chacarera days that she brought to the States, along with her cédula and a set of plates that had been in the family since her English ancestors immigrated to Santiago del Estero. Hélène drank mate with Mama and her friends, but only in sips, just to fit in with the grown-ups and join their conversations. The ritual of mate had long been associated with the gossip of older women, with the idle chit-chat of adults. Drunk while my friends and I rolled around in the mud and played tag. What would grown-ups talk about, I wondered. No clue as to why they talk so much. Now I couldn't get enough conversation or mate. ¿Querés? Perdón? He held the calabash gourd packed with yerba mate. ¿Querés compartir unos mates conmigo, che? The metal straw pointing at me released an easy stream of vapor. Tendrás que tomar de este, he said, shaking the mate. Tengo entendido que a los yankees les da impresión compartir un mate. ¿Qué es yankee no yankee? Te dije que soy tejano. Para mí son todos iguales. Llamar un tejano yankee es como llamar un porteño un cordobés, o un cordobés un mendocino. Nada que ver. He drained his gourd of fluid, poured out another dose, and offered it with a smile. ¿Tomás? Pásamelo. His name was Pablo, and like any good Argentine you met, he was the epitome of the nation itself, a nation of exemplary tokens. It's amazing how 40 million people could be so similar and yet each convinced otherwise. We're like a tribe, permit the we, with our own language, our celebrities, dance, sport. Sure, a lot was borrowed from the Spanish, English, French, and Italians, but Argentina did a fine job of nationalizing Castellano football, el foxtrot y sus apellidos. Tea time to meriendas. But a lot of homegrown, baby, like its cows and its mate. Mate, not mate, but mate. Not mate, but mate. With Pablo, I talked about this and that and the other. Jobs, music, women. Even recited Hernández al compás de la bombilla, just to drive the point that we were two Los Gauchos, passing one another solid drags of the drink, which I was beginning to enjoy more and more with each pull. Me gusta el mate como me gusta lo amargo, Pablo said. Es el último sabor que desarrolla la lengua, el punto máximo. Lo amargo recuerda los colores toscos de Jujuy, el aire frígido de lo más montañoso de la cordillera, en la mugre de las veredas rotas de la capital. Si hay algo que nos une a los argentinos es la amargura. Aunque varios se van echándole quejas a la vida, tanto como azúcar a sus mates, para mí no. No hay nada mejor que un buen sorbo a la fresca realidad. Un mate verde, por favor. Solo a mi abuela le perdono el endulzante. A mis amigos no. Por eso prefiero cebar a solas. He passed the mate to me. O con tejanos copados. As pessimistic as he seemed, I was honored to learn how to pour a good mate. Plus I had a solid buzz going. Felt like I could run a half marathon backwards, or do 80 pull-ups, or solve 100 algebra equations. The thoughts coursing through my brain's blood vessels tickled my nervous system into hyperdrive. Thought after clear thought. Things fell into place. I was content and at home there in Milano, as much as I had felt at home and at peace almost anywhere on the trip, because it was the now, or still is, depending. In any case, I felt in the right place and time. Pablo had straightened me out, and I was glad for it. That night, when I looked into the mirror, I realized my eyes were the color of yerba mate, and that if you really wanted to know someone, you should learn to share with them. If you want to get into their head, share something. If you want to know if they're trustworthy, share your trust. If you want to know if you can date them, share a dinner table. If you want to know what they're capable of, share your time. Share, share, share. For among the wise it is said, giving is receiving, because your receiving passes pleasures, and your giving adds joy. For a moment, I began to understand the rift between the boys and me, but I didn't think about it too much then, maybe for the better. But I didn't think because soon we'd be off again and I'd never see the gaucho Pablo again. Though his lessons soaked into the ridges of my tongue, I will always offer things, not just mate, to the ones around me, to the ones who never had any. Especially to the ones who in the past didn't like it. Who in the past once were hurt. They'll come around. We come around. You too. Vos también. Wow. So, just some notes on the end of that chapter. It's like half action, half reflection of Mikhail, the setup of Mikhail still being in fight, to be fighting with his best buddies. Him having breakfast alone. He meets Pablo. There's like a flashback to like what mate is. And then a little bit of a dialogue. A little bit awkward. I have to admit I was jumping some of the words and some of the lines. I guess my Spanish in 2018 wasn't that strong. Lame as that sounds. And then just a page of reflection about sharing. I need to re-edit this whole book, and reading this, and now that it's been a few weeks since I stopped shooting bursts of chapters, I'm thinking, I would edit so much of this. Like that chapter could have just been the fight part. It could have just been the dialogue. It could have just been Pablo, you know. But all jumbled up, it kind of came out like a poorly cut collage. Hell, maybe I would just cut the whole chapter. I was telling Ella, my darling wife and editor and agent for this book, that from a 320 page book, I'm gonna bring it down to 160, like just literally slice it in half. And she's like, no, you want to keep it novel length, at least do 250. Yeah, for sure. Whether it's 250 or 160, like some chapters just have to go, and it's awkward for me as the author to reread this. I'm like, oh my god, but what keeps me going is just the thought that someday someone's gonna look at this and say, damn, like how I have this conversation with writers all the time. They say, have you read such and such David Foster Wallace story? Yeah, I read it. It was awesome. But their reaction is, no, like, did you read it? Like, how could I ever reach that level of, greatness? And so they read good literature and they get demoralized. So to that kind of person, what if you just listen to David Foster Wallace read some awkward stuff? Wouldn't that make you feel great? I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm doing here with this. Look, check out the old version of this book. One day I'm going to write a nice version of it. And we'll all move on. And before I leave, since I'm just throwing out ideas, I was talking to Ella, as I do, and I was thinking, dude, how can I add value to YouTube? I've decided to just finish this reading, but then I'd love to start reading other people's stories and just commenting on them. And as I put those videos out, people will watch those like, oh, here's a writer who spent $50,000 on a master's and then suffered through his doctorate, earning $30K a year. I got the degree so other people can just, avoid it. Nah, I recommend it. The point I'm trying to say is I want to start critiquing other people's stories and putting it out there. And as a badge, I'll have put my own writing out there so no one will be able to criticize me as, oh, you spent all this time trashing all these other stories or praising all these other stories. Where are you coming from? Well, I'm coming from here, bro. Yeah. Brain dump, but it makes sense. It has to. And I will see you in the next chapter. Until then.